recorded live.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable podcast. This is podcast number 645. My name is Eric Nilsson. With me today, I have my favorite co-host. Today is Wednesday, May 17th, and my favorite co-host is, drum roll, Corey Romero. Corey, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Eric. How are you?
Excellent. Everything's good now. The weather's good, so I don't think we have to do any more of the weather reports. Everybody's happy living in no longer soggy, snowy, crazy land, but actually just fairly good weather.
Yeah, it's nice here in Utah as well. Yeah, it's nice and sunny, warm. Yeah, no snow, which is good. A little bit of rain, which is good. But yeah, into the summer weather.
Julia, you might want to pop up Corey's volume a little bit. He seems kind of light in my headset, but maybe that's just me. But check the audio levels on Corey just to be sure. And let's get into the news. What's actually happening? Color of the Bay. You know, it's beautiful, sunny here. A little bit chilly. You know, in the 60s and the early 70s. So happy times here in the Bay Area. The color of the Bay is just a nice murky brown because we have some wind. It's only about 2 feet deep in some places, so it kicks up the mud. And you know, the water's still running off the hills, so things are pretty muddy in the Bay Area today. So that's the color of the Bay. Corey Romero, any news on the vExpert front?
You know, I don't have any vExpert news. The only news I do have are blog pass results will go out next week. I do have one update we can talk about vExpert. For vExpert applications, one of the things that we did add is a pending application status. So for the upcoming applications that are going to open up next month in June for the second half, if we need additional information in the application and we don't receive any communications back from you when we reach out, we do have a pending status for the application. And what that just means is the application is just pending additional information clarification from either side, and then we can go from there. But yeah, that's all I've got for vExpert this week.
Cool. Well, the news on what's going to happen at Explore is ramping up. I know that the call for papers, we got V Brown Bag papers in. I think we've got like 40 plus V Brown Bag submissions for the community theater at Explore in Vegas this year. So that's exciting. I know that V Brown Bag also has the call for papers open for Explore in Barcelona. That's also open. So we're excited about that. The hackathon was also announced. Look on the social channels. We've been retweeting that. The hackathon is happening this year, and we've opened it up for teams and coaches and leaders and judges. I think they're announcing the judges later this week. So the hackathon is a go. It should be a great event, and everybody's pretty excited about getting together and doing some code again and doing it in person. So we got the hackathon announced. The call for papers are up. We've got code submissions happening as well. So if you have technical topics that you want to get a presentation in the Code Theater at Explore this year in Vegas or Barcelona, get that in. You can go Google and find the links on that. We've been tweeting that out on social as well. I know we've got X number of submissions. It's got like 15 code topics in so far for the sessions. Those sessions tend to be 30 to 45 minutes. So I think this year we only have like 30 slots, and I think 5 of them we've had to give to Spring One. So maybe 25 slots for the code topics. We are giving you more time to do a deeper dive on the code topics. So if you got a great topic for automation, either on Kubernetes or on PowerShell or any other automation, vRealize automation, or I guess we're calling it ARIA these days, ARIA automation topics, we do have them. Just to set the record straight on passes this year, we're not getting a lot of free passes from the events team this year. So understand it's Vegas. You can get free low flight prices to Vegas. I know that you can get super cheap rooms at the Excalibur, which actually got voted one of the best low-cost hotel options on the Strip these days because they redid the rooms, but they kept their price at like $25 a room. So I would strongly encourage you, if you're on a budget, to get to the Excalibur. But we aren't going to be able to get you passes to get in. we might buy a bundle of maybe 10 passes to give away to some people if they absolutely got a really kick butt topic session they're going to be doing, and we really want you there. We might put you on a list, but it's going to be few and far between. So understand that. Corey, I think you experienced the same thing for blogger passes. We had cut down number of 25 from 50. So they're just, making you pay for things as we go here. So be aware of that. Last thing before we get onto our show today, which I haven't talked about the topic yet, I'll get there, is the call for papers for Europe will open up in the next couple of weeks as well. I know the B Brown Bag already has that open. The code call for papers will get announced, as well as the hackathon for Europe in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned there. Going to be fun. We've got the hub area with all the community people engaged. We're going to do some really cool things in the hub this year. So we're going all out. So if you're listening to this podcast, you should definitely, figure out how to come on your own. If you can't get your company to sponsor it, go the cheap route, and we'll be there, and it's going to be a great time. So a lot of cool things we're going to be doing, a lot of great learning, and of course, all the sessions and everything else. With that, let's talk about the topic on today's podcast. We're talking about merging security with modern applications, observability. We've got Clemens Kolbich on the show today. He's a senior staff engineer with X Labs. So we'll talk to Clemens. I need to know whether X Labs is a VMware X Labs, or is there an X Lab somewhere else? I know we'll let him explain that. But I think he's out of VMware because he published his blog on the Octo Office of the CTO blog, octo.vmware.com. So Clemens, welcome to the show. Always great to have new people on the show, especially engineers. We always ask, tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been at VMware, and what does your career arc look like? Where else have you worked? Did you go to college, come out, go somewhere? Give us a little bit, tell us about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Corey. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invite. So yes, X Labs is within VMware. More specifically, we're part of the Office of the CTO, the Octo, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about what that means, but maybe a little bit about my background to start off with. So essentially, I have been at VMware for not quite 3 years, but my journey into security, because that's kind of my area, my strength, started already back at college in academic times. So essentially, I dove into system security and more specifically malware analysis. Back then, end of the 2000s, essentially we're looking like, how does malware behave, and can you just like throw them into a sandbox and say if a program is good or bad? So that's kind of my background. And from there, we actually started a small security company. I mean, beginning it was small, called Lastline. So the idea of Lastline was, we monitor your network and we find any files, any emails that enter, and we analyze them and we alert you of any anomalies, any maybe weird documents that you might be receiving as email attachments, or maybe there is already malware in your network and we can identify it's communicating over command and control. And, malware evolved in, the 2010s. And so, of course, my career evolved with them, where we, started looking more into maybe, scripts embedded in Word documents, or malware encoded as JavaScript, as VB code, things like this. But more and more, my career broadened into general network monitoring, where we were monitoring very large enterprises for malware infections and blocking that bad things happen if malware gets in. And so because of this, Lastline became interesting to VMware. And we were actually acquired in 2020, just as the pandemic was starting. We were acquired into NSBU, and we became part of the NSX portfolio. So, now the Lastline technology is integrated in the advanced threat prevention part of NSX security, and that's kind of how I got to VMware. Now, from there, I kind of wanted to spread more my interests and generally look into security and networking security. And that's how Project Trinidad, which had just started in the X Labs division, which is all about network security, it caught my interest, and I actually moved over, and I'm the tech lead over there now. So we can talk about what does Project Trinidad does, what does it do? But my responsibility there is really being the tech lead, understanding what are the problems we need to solve, coming up with innovative solutions, and kind of guiding the team into how we can do east-west visibility using data collected from modern applications or workloads running on Kubernetes.
Interesting. Yeah. It sounds like just an acquisition. Your career is technology acquisition into VMware. What's your thoughts on VMware coming from the outside in? What's your impression so far? I'll tell you my impression just to set the stage here. My impression when I came to VMware was I came from Sun Microsystems, which was a no company. They were basically, if you wanted to do anything, you had to get like boards and councils, and you had to present your project. It was like doing a PhD to get approved on to do anything you want to do at VMware. So when I came to VMware, it was almost the opposite. It's like a yes company. Everybody can do it. You can do anything you want, right? But be careful what you wish for, because you can get yourself pretty soon you're working every weekend, and your wife would divorce you, and you're like your life is messed up because no one tells you no at this company, other than every once in a while a legal person will come and yell at you after you've done something. So what's your impression coming into VMware? What's your exposure to the ecosystem? What do you think about that?
Right. So it's interesting. I have a very similar experience, but with a very different background, because working in a small startup almost in the beginning for 10 years, everyone works super, super hard. And so, my wife actually had the opposite problems, like, no, Clemens, you're coming home now. It is 8 p.m. And so coming into VMware was very interesting. First of all, because, everybody at the beginning of the pandemic was, of course, starting to work from home. So were we. But for us, it was not only that change, but also changing from knowing the 50 people you directly work with to working in an environment with, 40-ish thousand people, and, having very few resources, and really fighting for each individual customer in the previous company to having this massive amount of resources, and having all these super exciting customers that are already using VMware and might want to use your product now too, right? So that was a very different perspective. But also what you were saying, VMware being a yes company, I mean, it was incredible, right? Just the way that we have our epic values, and we really, we push them, we live them. It was super exciting to be part of this, and also just explore in a community of 40,000 people, just seeing other people with similar interests, people that work from sunny Santa Barbara, like people who live here. What do they do, right? How can we get together with all these new colleagues? It was pretty exciting, and I'm super happy to be at VMware.
Nice. And just one more question before we get into Project Trinidad. Where do you live?
So I'm in Santa Barbara County, a little town called Goleta. So for those of you who went to UCSB, they might be very familiar. Goleta is just a town right next to the UCSB campus. I live here with my beautiful wife and a 2-year-old toddler. So, my days are very, very active right now. Having
That's a great place to live. It's one of my favorite places in California. When you come down the mountain on the 101 and you come around, and all of a sudden you're looking at the shoreline right there as you come.
I know exactly what you mean.
I want to live right in that little town and just look at I feel like it's like maybe Ernest Hemingway, whatever the fish story. I forget what the fish story is, where he goes out and wrestles a fish. And I feel like there's that. It's like that story was written at that beach. Beautiful area. Yeah, really, really, really jealous of the weather down there in general, right? It's like really pretty. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Project Trinidad. So one of the things, what inspired the idea behind the project? Why don't you just a little bit about the project and your role in it, and how did you get there?
Absolutely. So yeah, let's maybe set the stage a little bit, right? So first of all, we keep calling it a project. I just want to make sure people understand what we mean by that. So one of the important things of Octo, and specifically X Labs, which is a group within the Octo, is we want to explore what problems exist, but maybe not problems that our customers have with existing products, but really problems that will arise in the future. And we want to be ready for those problems, and we want to come up with innovative solutions that work for customers. And the idea of X Labs is not to build a product per se, but we want to build a project that maybe a customer could try out, or they use it in some sort of form, give us feedback and say, hey, look, the idea is good, but maybe the execution is bad, or maybe the idea doesn't quite work for me. So we get customer feedback very early. And then when we see, hey, this project has potential, customers like it, then we try to mature it into a product where then customers can use it. And so Project Trinidad is exactly at that stage where we're trying to come up with some sort of a trial that customers could use, give us feedback, and then see how can we integrate it in as many different products, environments, so our customers can later use it. And so what is Project Trinidad? The idea is to help with east-west security. So let's say you have an application that you deploy on Kubernetes, and you want to find out, is this application secure, or was an attacker able to compromise, let's say, one of the container pods and is executing its bad, whatever it wants to do, maybe exfiltrate data, things like this. And so typically in the past, people have looked at this more from a system perspective, right? Where you say, oh, there are maybe a bunch of VMs running in your data center, and we observe how these VMs interact with each other from the network perspective, or we say, what type of things does a malware do on a host, right? It disables your security tools, it installs itself in AutoStart and things like this. And those are all super, super valuable things to do. However, as more and more workloads are moved into Kubernetes, it actually becomes very difficult because some of these concepts that we've had in the past just don't apply anymore. For example, if you think about, what is an IP in Kubernetes, right? Pods come and go all the time. Containers, there's multiple instances running it. And today, maybe they're in one part of the cluster, tomorrow they're somewhere else. So it's very hard to use these existing solutions and apply them to modern workloads. And so the idea of Project Trinidad is to have some type of data collector that monitors in a very non-intrusive way your Kubernetes workload or your Kubernetes workload and learns how do these pods talk to each other, right? So let's say you have an application, let's say there's 50 different services, there's 1,000 different pods making up these services, and we can say, today we learn how do these pods interact. Maybe there's a service A that talks to service B and they always follow a certain pattern, and maybe they exchange a certain type of data, and we can learn what does your application look like, what does it behave in normal circumstances. And then we can say, all right, now that we've learned this, and how we learn, we can dive into the details, but mostly we use machine learning. We can in the future say, if we ever see that your application behaves completely differently, well, that's not good, right? And then we can say, well, is it because one pod was compromised and that pod now does weird things we've never seen before and we want to alert this? Or it could be because your software updated, right? So we have to be a bit smart about finding anomalies. But the whole idea is monitor your workload, learn what it does, and then find anomalies and identify, are these anomalies security relevant, and alert the customer. And so you can see this project is, it's like we have to anticipate what type of problems what types of security threats are there on east-west traffic on modern workloads. And there are tons of products, right, that VMware has with its multi-cloud strategy. And how can we fit into these different products, and in the future maybe extend these products to do this type of security monitoring, right? And so that's the type of thing that an XLab project does, and specifically Project Trinidad does this on east-west security visibility. And so my role in this is what we call the tech lead. Essentially, we need to make decisions like, how do we monitor applications on Kubernetes? Because it's actually far from trivial. Or how do you learn what is normal? And we decided to use a combination of heuristics and mostly machine learning to do that. But then, all right, saying let's throw machine learning at this problem is actually very difficult, right? There's tons of different machine learning patterns out there, like types of machine learning, and we have to understand what direction do we want to go. We want to validate idea, try them, fail fast, try something else. And my responsibility is to say, all right, what are the things that we're trying out, and kind of what is the architecture that we're building? Always keeping in mind the problem we want to solve, coming up with cool ways and innovative things that could work, and then also understanding just what is the VMware portfolio, and in the future, how could we integrate this into these existing products? So working with those teams, understanding the type of data that they have, and how could we merge different features in the future to make up new products.
Yeah, I like it. Machine learning is a big thing, and I think that I was looking at the article, which I'll call out again, octo.vmware.com. Just go there and search on Project Trinidad, and you'll see a couple articles. And the one that we're looking at is a long topic called Project Trinidad: Merging Security with Modern Applications of Observability, Part 3, ML-based workload security. But you can just go Google it on Octo. They have a search thing. You don't have to Google it. You go to octo.vmware.com, search on the blog article. There's a search there, and just search on Trinidad. You'll get to read all about this. I'm looking at the part 3 here, and actually I had a couple of these parts up. I'm looking at the API schemas, right? And the schemas in general, which probably attach back into when you're I think that there's machine learning, but do you also allow some pre-configuration of what I think my network traffic is going to be, so that I can set up what I believe is the common behavior before I even start running machine learning on it?
Right. So it's an interesting question, because we had a lot of discussions around this. So our current focus is actually no. And the reason is not that we don't allow you to configure something, but we actually don't require you. Because one of the problems that we see is actually twofold. First of all, people don't want to take a security solution deployed in their cluster and now have to go and configure things, for days and days and understand.
Don't have the time.
And that is a huge issue. The second problem, however, is put yourself in the shoes of a DevOps or a SecOps persona in a large organization. They govern many Kubernetes clusters, tons and tons of services. They might not actually know what are these services that are deployed, right? They deploy the FUBAR product version 1 to 3, and it just works, right? And so the security solution should be the same way. So the idea that we have in the Project Trinidad is really, we want to be as easy to deploy as possible, and then automatically infer all the things that we need to know to make things happen. And so, you were just briefly hinting at the API schemas, which is actually one of the value props that we think is going to be super useful. Because machine learning is awesome, right? We all know in this day and age, it's just machine learning is everywhere. One of the problems is you need a ton of data, and you need time to build models that reliably understand what is your workload. But one of the key things that you can actually do very, very quickly is to give a human some sort of visibility into their cluster, which today, very often, they just don't have. And so one of the things that we do as part of Project Trinidad is, once we've learned a little bit once we've captured a little bit on how your pods interact with each other, your microservices talk to each other, we can actually extract the HP API schemas fully automatically for you. So we can paint you literally a picture saying, this is your cluster. Let's say there's 17 namespaces, and there's actually 14 groups of pods, of deployments, of replica sets, of whatever, that talk to each other. And here are the HP endpoints that they use. And so that tells you, I now understand how does my workload actually talk to each other, right? I can literally see what are the URLs that they invoke against each other. What types of parameters are there? And so as part of our very early training, we actually infer these schemas. We determine what are the URLs, the endpoints that are used to talk to each other. For each of these endpoints, what type of data is exchanged? What are the parameters that they send to each other? For the parameters, what are their types? And so we can very quickly identify, look, there's maybe 17 API endpoints that are interesting. They seem all to be using HP bearer tokens for authentication, things like this. So very, very quickly give you confidence in not only, Project Trinidad is actively monitoring, right? Because otherwise, imagine you deploy the project and then you need to wait 48 hours just to find out, machine learning has now trained itself sufficiently. No, you want within minutes to say, I see data coming in, I see this thing is working, and show value, right? And so we immediately give the user, the DevOps or the SecOps persona, this overview of what is in my cluster and what type of information are we gathering, and that immediately paints a picture that these people can use. And it's interesting, they actually, completely aside of possible security alerts that they will get or might get, they immediately actually have value, and they didn't know how these services work together. If you're the developer, of course you know how it works. But a DevOps person, they just deploy the product and they wouldn't know how it works internally. So that is a very useful thing right there. And that's why API schema discovery is this integral part at the very early start after deployment.
Nice. That makes sense. And I guess I back up and go like, so how does one go get this quote project and play with it, right? Like, do I run it in a VM? Do I run it in a Kubernetes? How
Right.
are you distributing? Do I go to GitHub and compile it? What's the way to get started in engaging with Project Trinity?
So right now we're just testing this internally to VMware because there's tons of teams, of course, that use Kubernetes, and we're still refining this. In the later part of the year, we're actually aiming for a trial way of using this project in a way that customers can use it and give us feedback. And so I can't talk to the exact details of how that will work, but at the later end of the year, we will have this ability for the community to try it out. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of announcements. So, keep an ear open for, Project Trinidad, how that will work. But yes, the idea will be you can essentially get the Kubernetes manifest, and maybe we can talk about like how will it work, right? Not just like how to get invited to this trial, because we will announce this. But the cool thing about, and we can dive into more details of this, is actually the way that you can install this is super easy. Because one of the ways that we thought is important is when we do data collection, it is done in a very non-intrusive way. Because one of the biggest issues if you deploy a security solution or any observability tool for that matter is if you have to change your application to make that tool work, I think we've already lost, right? The idea should be it's as non-intrusive as possible, and we keep like our internal like mantra for like how will this work is you literally do 2 clicks. One is download a set of Kubernetes manifests, and the second is literally kubectl apply those manifests. And the idea is that we use eBPF behind the scenes to essentially instrument all the Kubernetes nodes of your workload cluster. And essentially, we extract all the HP data that we need fully automatically without any change to your application. And I think at this point, it's worth pointing out there's actually an amazing open source technology out there called Pixie, which uses eBPF to do exactly this. They allow like zero instrumentation deployment of a data collector, and we partner with Pixie to do that data collection. And then we essentially have a SaaS-backed service where we stream HTTP data securely to the SaaS backend, and then we do the analysis, the learning, and the anomaly detection for customers.
I'm also looking at the blog. There's a part 1, part 2, part 3. So everybody should start with part 1 and go to part 2 and part 3, so you don't end up at the API section like I did and go backwards. One of the things that you talk about is the worst day ever, right? In an administrator, there's not enough coffee is the title of the first blog, and I get it. When a bad day happens, it's a nightmare, right? And you have a section here called regaining control, right? Does Project Trinity help you figure out how to regain control?
So in a way, yes, but the beauty is in a way, Kubernetes does a lot of that for us, right? So, a lot of people ask us, so can actually Project Trinidad go ahead and let's say we've learned very reliably what is the normal way, and now we see this abnormal behavior, right? So will we go and shut down, let's say, kill a pod, force it to restart? And the answer, at least right now, is no. The beauty by having all the context on, what pod is misbehaving, we can give very clear description of why do we think that something is anomalous, and we can tell you which deployment is it. And in Kubernetes, right, it's literally a kubectl delete pod or something to restore its original state, right? But with security solutions, it's a lot about how much would a DevOps person trust a security solution to automatically do that, right? Intervening automatically and let's say killing a pod is incredibly dangerous, right? It could take down your workload if it makes a wrong decision. So yes, it helps you by identifying what part is compromised and telling you exactly where you need to go and fix things. But then a DevOps would have to go and actually do that. The other thing that is really interesting to know though is, I was talking about before like exposing API schemas, but generally we learn how does your workload, interact, and from this you can actually derive other things that can help you put, add security. For example, Kubernetes has network policies, right? And I don't know how many, or I do know, but there's certainly many people that don't use network policies. And so by knowing how do pods interact, like which parts of your services talk to each other, you can actually start writing network policies and at least further restrict kind of, how are pods able to talk to each other. And that, of course, really tightens your control over your workload, and attackers have a much harder time, like doing nefarious things when they can't, for example, access your database or can't access certain APIs that they shouldn't be able to access.
Right. So one of the things that I look at Carbon Black, I look at NSX security, I look at we have security stuff all over the place. How does this fit into the overall, way we're tackling security at VMware?
Right. So I think it's really it really complements it. And so time with Carbon Black, of course, it's more like looking at the behavior of individual processes or VMs like this, and NSX is more on the system, or on the full system side, right, where you understand how do different IPs talk to each other, how do different VMs or groups of VMs talk to each other. And I think we really dive one step further, right? API security is really important to really get the context of not this IP does something, but really this IP belongs right now and maybe not in 5 minutes to this pod within this workload. And so by being a very Kubernetes specific solution, we have this context that a lot of other products today, they just don't have, right? So it's really important to be so focused on the context that Kubernetes has. And of course, we're really focusing on API security, east-west traffic, where NSX looks on the network side, but we dive really a layer deeper, right? We really look into the application protocol and can understand the weird things that are happening. Another thing that is also really important to point out here is eBPF is incredibly powerful, right? So while let's say NSX is purely on the network side, using eBPF on Kubernetes, we have NSX has to deal with all types of workloads, right? We can say specifically we support Linux-based kernels underneath Kubernetes, and we can use that fact, right? eBPF actually allows us to inject probes and extract data from within an application, meaning that we could, if we want, to look at HTTP before it gets encrypted. If you're purely on the network, you only see encrypted traffic. So by going into the user application, we can do much more on the layer 7 protocol and really understand how different pods talk to each other. So that kind of really sets us aside from these existing solutions. The other thing, VMware, really the strategy being multi-cloud, we try to say we standardize on Kubernetes. So, we want to be able to be deployed on any type of Kubernetes. Of course, we have the technical requirements to be on Linux because we use eBPF today. But, we try to be very broad, which really fits into the security strategy or the overall strategy of VMware being multi-cloud.
Yeah, you cut me off on my question. I was going to ask that. Well,
Okay.
How many? No, but it's good. You didn't cut me off. You just estimated my next question and addressed it, which is, what platforms you're going to be on, what Kubernetes you're going to support. It makes sense. You're a fabric below at the network layer, so you would, manage all the different payloads, Kubernetes versions, Linux running, on
Right.
top of that, so that you could manage that properly.
Yeah, I mean, technically, it's, the requirement that we make is essentially we are, on Kubernetes, and we are able to install eBPF probes. eBPF has been around for whatever, right, 7 years or so. Of course, there's been, multiple revisions, but any modern Linux kernel should do. And most Linux distributions have eBPF support enabled. So that should be fine out of the box. So, as long as these two requirements were good from the data collection side, and then any of the more recent Kubernetes versions that, we're able to talk to the API, gather the metadata that we need, should be fine as well. So we have on the standard Linux distributions, we've not seen any issues so far on being deployed there. And
I'm going to switch gears a little bit because we'll run out of time, and I want to step back a little bit. I think most people listening can go now look at the blog and go find it and read about it and know you're the team lead making that happen. Question for you: in your world, have you seen instances of places where Kubernetes workloads have been hacked and you've had issues around vulnerabilities where damaging things actually have happened? Just wondering, kind of probe your knowledge of the industry. Right. What have you seen in this space? What's some of your good stories?
Right. So, I think it's funny. My background, was in malware analysis, and now I'm in the Kubernetes world. And really, those two is a scary combination, right? Especially when you think of things like Bitcoin mining, it is very scary, right? If you have any attacker who has access to your Kubernetes cluster, there are tons and tons of off-the-shelf Bitmining tools that they can deploy on your cluster. So and that is unfortunately real-world things that happen. Attackers get access to your credentials, which really is an issue with east-west traffic. They can just start deploying things onto your Kubernetes cluster and start costing you tons of money, right? So there's like the financial aspect of infinite scaling, and having CPU resources for free for the attacker is a huge issue.
That's interesting. Like when we talk multi-cloud, right? And if you could get into some sort of AWS services and actually, deploy more pods, get more workloads spun up because you're using more CPU utilization and they're actually auto deploying to handle that workload, you could see a $1 million bill show up after two weeks of running on AWS without even knowing that this was actually happening.
Correct. So yeah, it's this almost real-time monitoring is super important, and automatically finding issues like this, right? And there are tons of things when we talk about Kubernetes observability that we can do in terms of security, right? And in a way, a lot of people think of ops problems, right? Like CPU, like the service is being slow, but if a service suddenly needs to scale up tenfold, is that because one of the services is too slow and we need more pods, or did somebody launch things that shouldn't be there, right? And so that's actually another thing that we help with, right? I mean, you could say, just detect things that haven't been there before. Yes, but if we look at network and how things interact with each other, we can automatically find such things as well, right? So it's really nice if you understand how is your workload supposed to behave and find any deviations from it as something that triggers an alert. There's many things that you can that you can cover with this, including any sorts of 0 days or completely unexpected security vulnerabilities, right? Or hackers deploying random new things into your cluster.
Have you got to meet with customers as part of the engineering and development process? Do you get to meet with customers sometimes? And is there a Knox or others that are telling you, this is what we need to be able to see to be able to, fit this into our operational processes for monitoring the network?
So specifically on Project Trinidad, I haven't talked to customers, but to several partners. And of course, I was just came back from KubeCon EU, and you talked to tons of people there. But of course, also just in my previous life in NSX and the last line security solution, of course, talked to several customers. But we also have an amazing, product management team who take care of all of that, and they talk about what are the problems, and they listen very, very carefully. And it's exciting to see, right? People like I was on a call with a partner I think a week ago, and it's like, this is exactly what we need, right? So it's like, yes, a lot of the many large organizations, they sometimes trail a little bit behind in terms of the tech stack that they use, right? And the largest companies might not all run everything on Kubernetes, but they know where they're going, right? They want to hear what are the problems that they will encounter. And the fact that VMware can be ready and help them with these problems is super exciting to them.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're busy in the development phase, running it inside of VMware. What are some of the challenges you have when you were trying to build this stuff that you guys had to overcome when it comes to technology?
Right. So one of the interesting things is running real world applications is actually not that easy, right? You'd assume, just take any application and run it for testing. Well, we want to be able to make sure that this project, it scales to hundreds of Kubernetes nodes, thousands of pods, and realistic looking applications. And sure, there's all these, everybody knows the sock shop application for Kubernetes and the online boutique and the whatnots, right? But they're very simple applications. Customer workloads are very, very, they're difficult, right? There's different versions. There's like weird stuff happening you do not anticipate. For whatever legacy reasons, things work weird, right? And so having realistic data sets is actually not that easy. And so, of course, we started with internal data sets, and we set up our classes, we run our own little applications, and we generate workloads, but it's never quite realistic. And so it was actually super exciting to interact with other teams at VMware that run actual workloads and do their thing and just be able to deploy on those clusters and monitor it for them, learn from, or build our training or do our training on their data sets. Another issue that that we have is, typically when people talk about, hey, machine learning, they think about, oh, there's this one machine learning model that, identifies apples and identifies whatever, right? It's one big machine learning thing that takes care of the problem. Now, in Project Trinidad, the issue is we don't want to learn workload behavior. We want to learn, what does your workload look like, right? And your workload is an orchestra of different products, different product versions that are very unique to you as one customer. And so our machine learning actually needs to train on your data set. And we need to train individually on all these customers and all their data sets. And it's one thing to train 3 models. It's another thing to train 1,000 models, because it means you cannot have an ML engineer handhold the model, say, is it good enough?
Right.
What are the false positives? So you need to automate a lot of this. And so that's a super just technically challenging problem to solve and to look into.
Yeah, it's not like you're trying to do AI for a Tesla where it's one footprint of the car. We know exactly what the CPU is on the car. We know what the sensors are in the car. And so therefore we know what the camera sensors. You're getting into the space of there's thousands of little applications running that they've handwritten and you don't know the endpoints. And so you're like, you need to learn this. And then I smile sometimes when I'm in the marketing buildings, because I work in marketing, and they tell me about, oh, well, just go talk to some other marketing people in our building. I'm like, unless you go get into IT practitioners who are at Starbucks or at Citibank, who are running large numbers of thousands of VMs simultaneously, you're not going to know what you're even talking about. And I say, nobody in our building can tell us how we run this stuff or use the stuff or the features we use, because unless you're talking to customers on-prem, seeing their architecture and then getting their feedback on how they use the stuff, we don't know, because it's very difficult, to your point, of understanding how they're actually using our product, let alone the security model and then everything you're talking about here, learning and building a model to it. I tell people that all the time, that we at VMware have a very difficult understanding how customers actually use our workloads, because we can't simulate that in our building.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's neat. So that would be a challenge. How big is the team?
So we're actually quite fortunate that we're able to collaborate with several different teams, across VMware. But essentially, we are 3 machine learning people. We're 3 systems people, and we have people looking at the UI, people doing the UX, product manager. So I think we're about 8 to 12 people, however you want to count, but that's about the size of it.
That's what they say is the optimal size of any engineering team. It gets too big and it gets very difficult to do that.
Exactly.
What do we always, as we come up towards the last 15 minutes of the podcast, we always ask, like, where are you going? So what are your hopes? Obviously you want to get your project out and launch it, but from a technology perspective, where do you think you're going? What excites you and what you're passionate about solving additional problems?
Right. So specifically for Project Trinidad, we want to get, customer feedback, learn from it, and then see how can we fit it into existing products so customers can actually in the future buy that, right? So that's the one thing that I'm very excited about. And then in general, X Labs is an amazing place to work at, because really we need to find the problems that need to be solved, right? There is not a product version 3 that has 17 Jira tickets from customers that need to be implemented. It's not only understanding here's a problem, go solve it. Is the question is like, ask yourself, what problem exists? What hurts our customer, right? What do we need to do? And then, customers will not tell you, you need to do X. They will say, I hate that this doesn't work. But you need to understand, it's like, what do they even mean? And do existing products, do they need to be improved? Or do we need to build a new product for it? Or is there technology out there that actually solves the problem, right? So that really excites me. Understanding, like, where does technology itself go? What are the problems that will come up with it? And, what solutions will there be? And so that's one of the things that, that X Labs project goes through, right? There's this phase where we just say, what is the problem we want to solve? Then there's the phase of, how can this be solved? And then if we can convince people within VMware that is that it is a problem worth solving, we create a team, we come up with a solution, we present it, we try to implement it if everybody agrees to it, and then we can see, do customers like it, and can this be integrated into a product, and where does it fit? And that is super exciting, right? So like all the time things evolve, and you go with technology rather than sticking with something and just like always trying to make it better. It's like we need to spearhead the innovation and tell, where are we going.
So, other question that I've been thinking about, like, I look at, I ran the social media and communities team, right? It's big, it's popular. When I started in 2005, it wasn't big and popular. Twitter didn't even exist yet, right? Communities was fun. We sharing bulletin boards, upload, download, that kind of stuff. It transitioned to web in the early 2000s. All of a sudden, web showed up and we could share. We didn't have to run illicit bulletin boards and have modems buzzing away. I look at your space now, which is AI and ML, right? Machine learning. And I feel like GPT chat, turned this into like the hottest things in sliced bread. And I got to say that you're in this space and, there's workloads, there's learning, there's everybody's trying to figure out NVIDIA GPUs and how to harness those cloud resources from NVIDIA to like, are you seeing this explosion? And I feel like ChatGPT just brought it to the forefront. What's your experience like now?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. When I started in security, I think my dad just did not know what I was doing, right? Like literally, he would still ask me, why is Excel not working? But I think nowadays it's different, right? People know about security. People know about machine learning. It is super exciting. People actually, it's interesting how you can start a conversation with non-ML engineers and people know what they're talking about. It is very, very exciting. People actually understand what it means to use ChatGPT and things like this, right? So it is super exciting, but it's also interesting to identify like what types of problems can machine learning solve and what types of problem can it not solve, right? So sometimes people just overestimate what machine learning can do, or like sometimes some models are not meant to do certain things. And so it's super exciting to just like keep up with the research, but also see how you can apply different problems, right? Things in the past that were not associated with machine learning, you can now bring together and come up with new things, new ideas. It's super exciting. It's new every day. They can barely keep up with all the news, right? It's an interesting environment.
It's interesting. I was working on some slides. I'll talk security in a minute, but I was working on AI ML slides last night because we're looking at what we're using it for. And I was like, yeah, we could use it for the VMware code program where we could have ChatGPT write PowerShell because it has PowerShell capability. And we could do some labs around that. We could get some sample code from ChatGPT. And my slides got reviewed by legal last night because it's apparently, it's going up the stack to executives, and mine's just a little tiny piece. But we got back from legal. It's like, yeah, you can't say that, right? Because we don't own the source copyrights to any kind of PowerShell that AI would actually generate for us, right? And so we don't even know the validity of that code. And you building samples and putting them out in a sample exchange using some AI engine that's building code, like, no, we can't do that. And so there's all of this that's everybody's super excited, but then when you get back to the reality of to your point of what it can and what it can't do and what legally you're allowed to use it for and how is it actually doing it, it's some magic thing that just happens. Well, no, there's actually some things that it's grabbing code from the internet and stuffing it into. It's like it's fascinating to watch that play out, right?
Yep, exactly. And if you think about like these implications as well, right? Machine learning models contain sensitive data. So how do you share them? How do you like what they're trained on, right? And that's also one of the reasons why we want to do per customer. And sharing information across customers can be difficult, but also can be dangerous. So there's like a lot of things you have to think about in the ML world that is super exciting and hard problems to think about.
Yeah. And security, the other one on the security front is like, I feel like ransomware, has started to impact a lot of people, even small people. Like it used to be, you would just, you would have viruses that would infect your PC and you'd have to go deal with that and get a restore somewhere else, send your disk somewhere, get it restored, get it unlocked, whatever. But it wasn't trying to, get money from you or get Bitcoin from you. But now ransomware has turned into this, depending on what your size is, it could be a $5,000 payment to $40,000 payment to $2 million payment. And that has just got that's like whiplash where we go, whoa, security used to be a thing that we wanted to make sure somebody was taken care of somewhere, so that somebody knew my root password and I'd have to restore from backups. But this whole ransomware explosion now has made it into, and it's part of Bitcoin and virtual currency, where this has enabled the ransomware market to actually, be capable. I feel like that's also jabbed a needle of steroids into your arm as well, right? Where you just, now that's also important.
I mean, many bad things came out of things like ransomware, but at least one of the few positive things is it was always very hard to convince someone to invest into security, right?
That's right.
You cannot see security until you have this moment where you wake up, it's like, I should have bought that solution after all. And ransomware at least put it front and center of media for a very long time, that people are now aware there are implications of not thinking about security. There are implications of thinking of security after the fact, right?
True costs, not just maybes. No, this is like dollar values that can be attached
100%.
to it.
Yeah. And and that's one of the things people could talk about, right? With more and more APIs being used, that's one of they talk about in API security, right? That's what East-West security is all about. It's like there's more and more and more APIs out there. Like with Kubernetes, they just became even more, and so now it just increases attack surface. So we need to think about this upfront. We need to help our customers understand this and do offer security solutions that they don't have to configure and train for months or have a hard time installing. It has to be out of the box and help the customers. So,
all right, I got one last question on this. Coming from outside into VMware, in the last few years, whatever. I was telling people that multi-cloud. If you really look at VMware is a perfect position to do multi-cloud because we write really great, solid software, right? We must have good engineering best practices around building good code and testing good code, because I find our products to be rock solid, beautifully designed, good UEs, doesn't crash, doesn't core dump. You get exposed to the engineering best practices. How would you rate VMware's engineering best practices as far as code reviews and code elegance and so forth? What do you think about that coming into VMware?
So it's actually interesting. We prided ourselves in code review at my previous company. And so my bar was very, very, very high. And so I was very happy that we were able to continue that bar within VMware. And I think it's very different across different teams, right? I've not worked in a ton of teams. So I can't speak to all of them, but I was very happy to see, there were code reviews and things like this in the NSBU world. And in X Labs, it's actually a very interesting negotiation between, we want to be able to explore things, right? We're not writing product code. We're exploring an idea and convincing people that we still want to write unit tests, have end-to-end tests, do code reviews. It is, especially with junior engineers, it's a tricky thing, right? Because you want to walk a fine line of this is good enough, but it also means it's still maintainable 2 months from now when we'll have forgotten why we do this and we might change minds. So
the other thing that
happy with what we have, but it's a fine line to walk in research.
I've also discovered in research projects, it's a fine line between it being a research project and being a product, right? Like that can tip over really quicker than anybody realizes. And then you've got bad code in a early product because people didn't do the work up front in the project timeline, research project line. Java was that way at Sun, right? Like if you talk to what his name was, I forget who funded Java, but you talk to him and he's like, I did as a project. It's got bad code everywhere, right? Because I was just hacking things together, right? And and that's one of the risks you have in a big company when you're doing these projects is if you don't do good code in the early days, you could end up with something that's in the product that you didn't want to, but some SVB came down and said, no, we're going to go with this, right?
Yes, no, don't worry about it. It's just a temporary bash file. It's like, no, it never is.
Exactly. Well, all right. We're at nearly top of the hour. We have 3 minutes. We do broadcast this podcast on youtube.com/vbarbecue. And because we're there, you can go check out what Clemens looks like because we live stream it. Most of the people are listening on iTunes just to the audio. But if you want to look at what Clemens looks like and see his blurry background of his wherever the heck he is down in Santa Barbara somewhere, you can go check him out on vbarbecue VBarbecue, youtube.com/VBarbecue. And to celebrate that, Clemens, we always ask people, and you're from, mid-state, so you should be able to do okay on this question. Do you do any barbecue? And if you do or don't, what is your favorite barbecue? Or do you have a place you like to go to?
Right. I heard that you guys talked about your Traeger and how it worked in the rain in the past. So being in Santa Barbara, I think I'm doing quite okay on my tri-tip on the Traeger, which is quite good. We've experimented with a lot of Indian friends, like Indian spices. I can only recommend it. It was amazing. But I'm from Austria. And so, the summer starts with a good sausage on the grill.
Oh.
And a lot of friends in Turkey. So a good sucuk is definitely something to check out on your grill.
I come from LA. I lived in Calabasas for a lot of years and then moved up to the Bay Area to be in follow tech in Silicon Valley. And tri-tip to me and the rubs that you get from, Central California are just amazing. And then the sausage, if you go to some of the good barbecue places in the center of the state, they just have amazing sausage at the same time. So yeah, it's a great shout out, man.
Perfect
that makes me hungry. Some good tri-tip with a nice rub is good. Tony Foster, I know you're floating out there. Don't know if you have any barbecue report for us today.
I do, but it's not going to compare. This evening, I'm going to be doing pork burgers and some grilled bok choy.
There you go. Grilled bok choy. That's nice. Believe it or not, I planted a garden and some of my lettuce has come up, and it turns out I didn't buy lettuce. I bought like some kind of bok choy thing that's grown up. So we grilled it up last night, right? But that sounds great. Pork burgers. So you grind up pork, or do you just buy pork? Do you take a pig out of your Kansas backyard and then chop up something and make some nice fresh pork, or you just buy it?
I don't actually have any pigs or any livestock whatsoever.
Very disappointing.
Never have, probably never will.
But you're a judge in all these county fairs. I thought that for sure you would have some livestock by now.
No, I judge STEM. So computers and rockets and stuff. Yes.
STEM judge in county fairs. What good are you? All right, there you go. Pork burgers from Tony Foster. Clemens has got the traditional tri-tip and some sausage down there and down by Santa Barbara. That sounds awesome. Clemens, thanks a lot for coming on this show. If people want to follow you, or are you on social? Do you have a Twitter handle? How do people, I know you post on the blog, the Office of CTO blog. That's a great series. How else can people follow you? Any particular
I think
way?
blog and LinkedIn is my primary means. So
your
find
go-to.
me on LinkedIn.
All right.
Exactly.
And I will spell Clemens, Clemens, and Kolbitsch, Kolbitsch. If you want to follow, see what he's doing, go find him on LinkedIn and read his stuff. Go for that. Clemens, thanks for coming on and sharing what you're doing. Sounds like a cool project.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Perfect. All right. With that, we're gonna wrap it up. We will be back again next week, as always, Wednesday, noon to 1, and we publish on iTunes and YouTube. Thanks a lot for being here. Go get yourself some barbecue and have a great rest of your week.